first of all, I have to say that free money does not exist. Yes, it is a grant. A lot of funding is called grant money, but there's quite a bit of work that goes into making yourself the best candidate for the money and being awarded the money from the program, and in keeping track of what you need to keep track of in order to close out the program, whether that's reporting that you need to do on the outcomes of the project that was funded, or whether it's literally reimbursement, which is the kicker that gets most of our reporting in gear, when you need to spend your own money first and then be reimbursed from the grant funds for eligible expenses. So there's some administrative time behind the scenes, and the larger the program, the more complex the reporting. So in general, my advice as we go through here is to take a look at baby steps. What are the first and smallest things that you could approach within these programs to get your feet wet and see if that works for you, and also to establish your own internal processes for how you will keep track of what the grant's requiring. This is what we're going to cover today, a survey of programs. I would be remiss at this point in time if I didn't talk about the CARES Act and the FSA programming for farms. That's right here at the top because there are a couple deadlines that are pressing. Then we'll move on to the USDA's value-added producer program. It's long-standing, it's annual, it survived several farm bills, and it's also one of the more complex applications that are out there. My local administrator had told me at that time that so much as having a single form in a single field in a single form incorrect would justify rejecting an application, which is heartbreaking to me because of the time and effort that goes into it. So very rigorous. If you can make an application there, you can use much of that information for many other types of programs. There's a Minnesota-based program that dovetails with the USDA's program called the Minnesota Value-Added Producer Grant. We'll talk a little bit about the Rural Energy for America program. There's some neat opportunities happening this year that might help fund some infrastructure if you've been thinking about energy costs and upgrading equipment that are causing quite a bit of that energy usage. And then there's a master sheet of several different Minnesota-based programs that are more specific to your industry or your crop. The second part is just preparing an application, some things to start thinking about, and to how to reverse engineer from the deadline back through what you will need to generate for your individual farm or project. First of all, the CARES Act and FSA programs for farms. You've probably been made aware of it through USDA reporting, but there's a program called the Paycheck Protection Program. In red letters, it says it's due today. Today is the last day that you may submit that application, and they are not called grants. They are called forgivable loans, and they are in the amount of 2.5 times your average monthly net income. So they're looking at your Schedule F. If that net income is positive, then put your thinking cap on about whether you might want to pursue that today. It's a very simple application. It does use your tax return from 2019, and it will go through your local bank. It's intended to protect your ability to pay yourself. If you have W-2 employees, they would also be part of the calculation for this program. And what they mean by forgivable is that they've now so that you may use it in the increments that are needed. I'm hoping my internet connection is stable. I just got a message that it was not. You can use it to pay farm utilities as well, rents and leases, and mortgage on loans that are held by your farm or by your business. Again, the application is very simple. If you are hearing this and wanting to pursue it before our resource sheet gets sent out, go ahead and Google the Paycheck Protection Program or just PPP, and you'll be directed to what you need to find the application, and you may contact your bank about what else they might need as proof as part of your application. The SBA's Economic Impact Disaster Loan Program, I call it the EIDL, is also open to farms right now. And it has two components. A loan advance, also again, not called a grant, but the loan advance is $1,000 per employee that does not have to be paid back. So even if you do not use an additional loan that might be offered to you from the SBA at the terms that are listed there, that $1,000 per employee is yours to keep. So if that is awarded and you decide not to use the lending tool, you may still turn it down and keep the advance. That application is also online. Again, you can Google EIDL and SBA and you will find it. It's very simple. They've streamlined it so that many people can take advantage of it. And it is open to farms and other self-employed people. All right, the USDA Coronavirus Food Assistance Program. This is something that just opened in June and that FSA is geared up to handle. It's through our farm services agencies, and I will just send a shout out to anyone who's working in those field offices. They did a great job figuring out how to take in information about the program and then processing a lot of applications with very little lead time. They went within a week. They had to repurpose quite a bit of their staff just to make this happen, and they are turning over applications very quickly. This is direct support for farms who have commodities that qualify for, that were impacted in the market downturns, including dairy, livestock, and the both non-specialty and specialty crops. So I would take a look at that. They call it CFAP, terrible name. Farmers.gov/CFAP will give you all of the information there. The fastest way to get this done is to call FSA. If you already work with FSA, they've got what they need, and they'll be the ones to assemble your application for you to review. If that's not possible and your office is busy enough that they require you to do that work yourself, you can download and work on a worksheet from the website as well. For larger producers, there's a second component that they haven't talked a lot about through the CFAP program, but it's called the Farmers to Families Food Box Program. And that's a direct sourcing matching program for sourcing commodities and then putting them through the systems that give people access to food, whether those are institutions, nonprofits, other organizations that are actively distributing food. It's connecting, creating a network for food sourcing. Here's a kicker. Who knew that wildfire and hurricane indemnity would apply in the Midwest? It turns out that it does under a provision for excess moisture, which many farms have experienced in the years that are covered, and those are 2017, 2018, and 2019. Again, this is an FSA program. So if you are already enrolled with FSA, go ahead and call your local office. They're busy with the CFAP information needing to be submitted, but they will put you on a wait list to work through this additional application. It's basically a retroactive crop insurance for those crops that might have been insured but were damaged and didn't match up with production projections. So I would advise you to Google this program as well, read through how it works. Again, this will be listed on the resource sheet that we'll be sending out with active links so that you can read through it when you have the time. But it does cover both insured and uninsured crops, and they do use different multipliers for harvested and unharvested crops. So as you know, FSA has most of your crop insurance information already on file, but if you have harvested silage or other stored forages that your insurance might have called unharvested, the truth of the matter is you did spend the money to pass over the field and create a crop that could be stored. So you've already invested in that, and it's a matter of coordinating what your insurance has reported and what FSA has on file to make sure that your investment in those field passes is accounted for. That is a larger application that looks intimidating from the outside, but it truly has to be completed by FSA using their own aggregation systems and how your information is stored with them. So contacting them, getting in line, and supplying anything that they might need if you need to go back to your insurers to get the numbers that they want to use. One thing you can do in advance on your own is to go to this website, again in the resource list or by Googling this, and check which counties are eligible in which years. It does vary by county, and that will let you know which year's production records you'll need to be locating. On to the value-added producer grants. What does value-added mean? I'm going to skip ahead to that. Value-added is a term that means you have changed the state. You are adding value to a raw commodity and you are selling it somehow in a marketplace, either direct to consumer or through distributors. And also that you have control of the product from raw commodity through to its sale. Even if it's at a distribution level, if you have control of it from live animal, for example, through harvest, the making of a value-added sausage, for example, and for sale to a distributor who's going to take it to stores, that is an eligible use of this funding because you are adding some product value by making a specific product or by selling it with specific claims. And that means, to start at the top here, you're changing the state. You are marketing it for a specific quality, whether it's a claim, a USDA recognized claim as organic or grass-fed. You're transforming natural resources into energy. And that is a category that I myself am really interested in. I haven't worked with anyone in that field yet, but they do have a separate application now if you are a harvester of materials. You don't have to be the producer of them, but if you're harvesting them, there is a separate value-added producer grant application now, which I think might be kind of 2.0 for this program. I'm glad that they're recognizing that. Locally produced food is a bucket that many of us have been working in for many years, and that is, there are some parameters. I believe it's 400 miles that it might be produced and sold, and that is something that many of us can meet here in the Upper Midwest. And also mid-tier value chains. And that means that you might have multiple producers working together with a specific processor of some kind, whether that's community-based or someone who might be changing the state of the product into its saleable form. If all of those people are invested in the project and are seeing additional returns from the fact that you are able to sell a value-added good, that is the qualification for a mid-tier value chain. I'm going to back up here. Here's the overview of the grant itself. First of all, these programs are massive, have massive detail that come down from the federal level, and the application specifics do change a little bit from year to year. So we do wait on the announcement. It's called the NOSA, basically a solicitation of applications. It's released in November and December annually. Your local rural development offices are really good at translating what has happened and what has changed within the application from the previous year. So if you're already on their list, they're probably emailing you, but know that this application gets released in November and December, and I would reach out to rural development and see if they can give you an overview of what might be different, and also to ask preliminarily how your project might apply so that you can get the go-ahead or get a quick and dirty review of how you can help make your project eligible. The applications tend to be due in March through June, The exact dates do vary by state. I believe they have some leeway in how they assign those deadlines so that their offices can process them accordingly. Sometimes it depends on when the application is announced, and if that pushes later into the first part of the year, then naturally the deadline is extended as well. So take a look at that. Take a look, and I know it always feels far in the future, but look at the deadline and reverse engineer what it's going to take for you to finish an application. Not just by deadline, although I work on deadlines as well. But to get it done a little bit early so that your rural development office can take a look at it and let you know if there's anything you could improve, if there are any parts that you have not articulated clearly enough to garner additional points in the scoring. Part of the nature of this project, of this program, is that there are scoring criteria for each aspect of the application, and there could be ways in which you would qualify for additional or better scoring toward landing the grant that you misinterpreted or you didn't articulate clearly in the section where they needed to see it. There are two things that you can find at these things. Whoops, sorry. Can't touch the screen. Planning grants, up to $75,000. Planning grants are for bigger projects that you as a business are looking more long-term for. If this is something that's going to require a lot of planning, and typically this is a feasibility study, something that is a major investment that you need to demonstrate to a lender, likely, has market potential. That's what a planning grant would be best used for. Most people, and this is what I did as well, apply for working capital grants. And again, they have two types of application. A simplified application, this is your baby step, where you may apply up to $50,000 or $49,999. And it does not require a more complex feasibility study. This is an entry point for brand new businesses who don't have a product in the marketplace for 2 years or more. You can see that criterion at the next bullet point. Or for businesses that are just finishing their first business plan. This is still an opportunity to demonstrate that there is a value-added product and there's room in a market and you'd like to pursue it. The larger tier is $50,000 to $250,000, and that's enough money that they need some proof in the pudding, that you've been in the marketplace for a couple of years, you have a feasibility study, or if you've been out there and been successfully selling what you do, they will accept a business plan, a full business plan in lieu of a feasibility study. So again, new businesses can get in at this point, but a feasibility study is something that does take a bit of time and is also needing to be produced independently. I worked with my local RC&D office at the time to produce a feasibility study, and I will need to look, and I would like to add to the resource sheet some additional recommendations for other resources that you can use to solicit a feasibility study, whether it's something you pay for out of pocket or if it's something that can be subsidized through other programs. And Courtney might have some feedback on that as well. Here's how grants work and how they are painful for businesses that are already up and running. They require some degree of match. So yes, there's grant funding, but you have to have your own skin in the game as well. The USDA's producer grant is a 1-to-1 match. And the way it works is that you must demonstrate the availability of the same amount that you're asking for or greater. And as you execute the grant, you must spend your own money first and then apply either incrementally throughout your grant term or at the end of your grant award to have that money reimbursed from your eligible or from your grant award because you've spent it on eligible expenses. So that's where the documentation comes in. And it's also where you have to realize within the cash flow of what you're doing within your business, if it's something that you're that's new, that's outside of your existing workflow, there's going to, that's going to create a crunch. You might have additional funding from a lender as your match for this program, but it's also, it's a struggle for a startup and for existing businesses to operate that way. Cash flow is different from income, as we know, and that's where you have to think ahead to how to start small and how to afford what you're doing and have the time to recoup the grant funds as you go. We talked about value added. Eligible uses of this thing. Planning grants are feasibility studies and business and marketing plans. Although I will say the caveat is that there are other ways to get additional help with business and marketing plans. That would not necessarily be the first thing that I would apply for if I were interested in a planning grant. I would seek out a feasibility study. Those are typically something that needs to come from a specialized firm. If it has to do with infrastructure, it might be engineering. It might be something else having to do with your marketplace that would require industry knowledge that isn't necessarily part of a regular business plan, a standard business plan. Working capital grants are the easier way to use this grant money, and I don't know what the breakdown is between planning and working capital, but I believe this is the direction that most people do go. It covers costs of production, including a portion of your labor or your payroll. And these are not new hires. They might be people within your company who are dedicating a portion of what they do to the particular program that you're funding. Marketing and distribution costs, and costs associated with food safety certification or improving food safety. Caveat, you cannot buy anything that is fixed. Buildings, facilities, land, vehicles, any kind of asset that is not the consumable product that's going out the door. There's a little bit of overlap there with the food safety, but for the most part, if it's a fixed asset, it will not qualify. You can't pay expenses not directly related to it. So yes, you can use it for payroll, but you'll need to document how your employees' time is spent, including your own. I'm sorry, you cannot pay yourself with the grant funds. I misspoke there, sorry. Your employees who are not owners of your company, you'll need to document what they're doing and why a portion of their labor is justified toward this program. Research and development, and you can't, again, this is the last bullet point, you can't pay yourself or for people who have some kind of conflict of interest, an owner and immediate family member. Minnesota did something really cool when they launched the Agri Value Added Grant Program. They looked at those ineligible expenses from the Value Added Producer Grant, and they built something to accommodate them. So the Value Added Grant Program, not to get tongue-tied with the name, has to do with covering those things that the federal program does not. So you can use it for fixed equipment purchases. You can use it for feasibility studies. Grants can reimburse up to 25% of the eligible expenses, and which is less than the federal program, but still substantial. And I think that's a great thing to recognize, that a lot of these programs within small businesses are going to require both of those things. It's not just the idea and a new product that you're taking to market, but there's likely something within infrastructure or expansion that's going to have to happen to make it possible. And so I've seen this program run for a couple other farmer friends, and it works really well. They really want to see multiple producers impacted by the projects. So if you are cooperatively producing a raw material that you're taking to market, that's something that they're looking for. This is changing gears toward the Rural Energy for America REAP grant. There is something really cool happening right now in the Winneshiek Energy District, which is based in Decorah, Iowa, but represents our Northeast Iowa and Southeast Minnesota region. They have landed their own REAP grant to subsidize the cost of energy audits for farms. These are things that you have been looking at. It might be aging infrastructure. It might be leaky windows, lighting costs in dairies. It might be grain dryers, things that suck up a lot of energy in an ongoing basis, or seasonally if it's in terms of grain setup. But what this does is subsidizes substantially. It covers 75% of the cost of having a professional auditor from Winneshiek Energy District come out, assess everything having to do with your energy usage and your physical structure, your physical plant, and create an audit that you can then use to land your own REAP grant to pay for the implementation of those improvements. I have my colleague Joel Zook at Winneshiek Energy District says this works really well, especially with dairy lighting. It works in tandem with the utilities. Each utility company or cooperative that might already have replacement subsidies in place. And by the time it's all said and done, you can replace a lot of lighting nearly for free. So it's worth taking a look at. I've highlighted at the bottom there that an audit for an operation is going to cost you, the producer, $600 to $800 and possibly more for more complex farms if you have multiple locations or substantial infrastructure that needs to be assessed together to complete the audit. But it's a great opportunity if you've been looking ahead at something that is perhaps a known cost, a known replacement cost, and has to do with how your farm uses energy. Get in contact with them. And again, this is on the resource sheet. And take a look to work with them and get that audit in your hands. I believe it'd be helpful, if only to justify what you're doing to your own lenders, even if you decide not to apply for your own REAP program, your own REAP award. This is how to do it, however. The REAP grants are open to individual farms. So you'll take your audit from Winneshiek Energy and use it to apply for your own grant funding. The terms are listed here. Again, the baby step is a grant of less than $20,000 due by October 31st. I'm sorry, that says 2019. It should say 2020. Those are good ways to take a look at maybe lighting upgrades. If you've been looking at solar, I know that marketplace has shifted substantially in recent years, and Winneshiek Energy District would be a great resource for figuring out what might be possible at the commercial level. But if that's something you've been interested in, this would be a good way to assess what's possible and to then apply for your own funding. And they offer both grant standalone awards and combination of grant loan awards that require different amounts of producer commitment or input. Eligible projects for REAP, I should have possibly started with this slide too, are energy systems. So if any of these, including solar and wind, have been on your radar, that can be the central part of the audit. Eligible expenses, things that you can do, would include insulation, as well as windows, doors and windows, lighting, heating and ventilation, any of the electric and solar usage within sprinklers, different types of pivots. We don't have many of those here, but it might apply to some part of your infrastructure. And energy and inefficient equipment, that might be a grain dryer. It might be something else that's aging and that needs to be replaced at some point in the timeline of your operation, but this is a way to approach it from an energy standpoint and take advantage of these programs to help fund it. This is a master list. Don't be overwhelmed. The links here are also included in the resource sheet. They appear on a page that's already compiled from the state of Minnesota, but if you just skim down, you can see that there are several that apply to specific industries or crops. Each of these is a grant program that has its own deadline. If it's of interest to you, take a look at when the application would be due. And again, we'll be reverse engineering the time it might take to get an application together. Here is where the magic happens. Preparing an application. I'm not going to walk step by step through each of these applications because they do take some time on your part reading and skimming through them to begin thinking about how to put your own information into the application. But here's how to structure how you think about it. It's easy as a first-time grant applicant to know you need the money and to assume that you will justify the money for your business in general. Here you are, this is what you do, that this is what you'd like help with. But many of these programs do allow you to apply more than once in subsequent years. So the baby step to getting this done would be to single out a particular product or a particular project and build your application around that, so that in a subsequent year, you can go back to the same program and apply for another product or another project. Smaller and shorter awards, as I've said, are easier. They're a good jumping off point just to see how it works within your business. And then also plan ahead to how applications may dovetail. The REAP subsidized audit and the REAP application go together. For example, the value added and the Minnesota value added grant go together because they fund different things. So I think it's hard to know what's out there, but it's also it's good to start small and plan to start small, and that that what you already do might already contain products or projects that can be treated separately for the purpose of a grant. Here's the other trick for small businesses. We're already busy. We're already likely producing what it is that you're applying for grant funding for. You have to look at how the timelines work for these things. Programs don't usually allow you to count things that you've already spent money on. So if you are preparing an application and it goes in June, for example, but you won't be awarded or notified of award until November, December, you're going to need to wait on that project until the award has been made, because anything you spend on it will not count or not be reimbursable through your grant funding if you've done it before the grant was awarded. Sometimes you can get creative with some invoicing dating to put things inside your grant window, but that's not really the correct way to plan for this. So just be aware, and as small businesses, this is really tricky. There's just a mismatch between when the ideas are happening in your business and when the opportunity is right and when the award might be made. But it's one thing to consider. Another, in executing a grant, is to write your budget for the grant. Every grant has a budget template that they need to include that explains what you're going to spend the money on, where it's coming from, and basically how it's an eligible expense. And to write those as simply as possible so that you're not caught in a situation looking far into the future, having written it so specifically that that's no longer relevant to your project. For example, you might have a marketing expense, which would include several different kinds of things, like t-shirts and caps you might make for your brand, or an event sponsorship or social media, as opposed to saying print advertising, because to the letter of the law, that might only include newspaper and magazines, and that's not something that you would be investing in within that time. And it's a terrible thing to have grant funding awarded and to not be able to use it because the budget didn't include something that in real time is what your business is using. Forecast what your business needs to secure proof of matching funds. This is where you're having to justify it to your bank. And you might be working with a line of credit, but again, if you're looking into the future and you know that this line of credit is going to need to be available to you at that time, you're going to need the business to be in a place where you can renew that. So the application will require proof of matching funds. That's usually proof of line of credit from a lender or a bank statement that shows that you have cash in hand. You're going to need to renew that when the grant is awarded. So again, the application goes in June, you're awarded money in November, you're going to need to demonstrate that at both points in time. Tools for preparing an application. Again, most grant applications look like a business plan. They're using components that you're already tracking within your business. And if you have a working business plan, it's going to be a copy and paste maneuver to move those sections from what you have already estimated and what's already working within your business as justifications into your grant application. If you don't have a working business plan, and trust me, many of us get into business because we love it, and then we realize how we need to invest in the running of the business, working on it in addition to working in it. And retroactive business planning is a common thing. If that's your situation, you're not alone. In that case, skip ahead to the financial portion of a grant application and take a look at what you're going to need to build. Usually those are finances that you're already tracking, but that you might need to put into their proper and formal format for the first time, whether that's generating a balance sheet, a profit and loss statement that's specific to the product or to the project that you're applying with. And if that's something you needed outside help with, getting those finances done is something to budget for by looking through the complete application and prioritizing the things that you're not sure you can do yourself. That said, as you tackle these things, keep moving. It's not a big deal if you don't know how to fill out a specific section of the plan, or it doesn't seem to, the application is asking for something that doesn't translate directly to what you do in your business. You can come back and fill in more detail, or you can reach out to one of the resources here at CEDA or SBDC or anywhere else to get some advice on how to fill that out. And if you're working with forms and reports for the first time, there are good templates out there. The Small Business Administration has several. I came across one that I will go and link that talks quite a bit about how to target your customer, how to articulate who your target market might be, down to the granular level of who your customer truly is. And that's useful information that you'll find yourself recycling again and again as a business person. When you explain what you do and what you make, then you're also explaining who you sell it to. And that's an important and powerful justification to know that your market exists and that you know that market really well and well enough to compete. Small business development centers also have templates. And then SCORE.org is a national consortium of volunteer business mentors and coaches. And they have developed a great set of resources online that are either downloadable resources, they're courses that you can sign up for and take, or they are recorded webinars that walk you through parts of a business plan or parts of marketing considerations. Application writing tips. This is the kind of my hot list for how to make the most of an application. First of all, again, if it's a major program like the Value Added Producer Grant, they have things that they're going to use to score your application. And sometimes it's a matter of you having used a particular phrase that you demonstrated and justified why you qualify for a particular amount of scoring points. And if the scoring criteria for any program are listed as part of the application process, read through them and make clear note of how you do qualify. And again, this is not, there's an interesting psychology in here. And I think Midwesterners fall particular victim to this. You have to approach scoring criteria as that, yes, my business does qualify. After all, this program was built for you. You have to think of it as, yes, I need to justify how I do qualify, as opposed to thinking, Midwesterners, well, I'm not sure, it's not exactly, what I think I'm doing, or there must be someone else who would deserve that funding more, who could use it more. I've heard that line of justification many, many times. No, these programs are built for farms. They're built for you. They're built for making farm business work. And so when you know what the criteria are and it rings a bell, yes, articulate who you are and why you qualify. The Minnesota Value Added Grant Program has another nifty offering that's in the fine print, is that if you are interested in applying, you can look back through previous award winners and request a copy of their successful application. So essentially, you can go and read through a successful application that you may use as a template, where you're swapping out information. And it might be very specific to your product. And that might be a great way to map out information and see how they justified different parts of the application that were successful. You have the benefit of knowing that it was previously funded. Copy important criteria phrases verbatim. This is where it gets a little bit, it sounds a little bit like filing your taxes, where you might think to yourself, I've already said that. I said that back on page 7. Well, yes, but repeating the qualifying phrases is literally what they're reading for. It makes it very simple. I'm a writer, so I err on the side of exposition and maybe over explanation. But what they're looking for might be that I qualify for this because this. And you might need to recycle that in different sections of the application. It might sound ridiculous, but you might also want to consider on bullet point 3 here that different people, these are big applications, and they might have multiple people reading them, or reading and comparing different sections. So if they don't see that eligibility and justification in their section, they might assume it doesn't exist, and you might miss out. Look ahead to the program, how the program is intended to support specific players in the marketplace. So eligibility for reserved funds, funding priorities, and other bonus points. The Value Added Producer Grant does have reserved funds set aside for beginning ranchers or farmers. And at the time that I last applied, those were people who had been in business, I believe, 3 years or less, who did not have a Schedule F greater or in 3 years prior. I would have to double check on what that number would be now, but also for women-owned enterprises, and that's a percentage of 51% or more ownership, and veteran-owned enterprises. If those reserve funds are set aside, that's the phrase you're going to be repeating over and over. This is a veteran-run enterprise. The project may also qualify for more than one type of priority. And again, that's something that you'll need to articulate. And if you're using the phrases that they spell out in the application, they will see that in every application and it will score better. Higher score means funded or not funded. Support and assistance for this. USDA's rural development offices do this for a living. So if it's a federal program and it comes through through USDA, they have essentially people who review applications who are also available to articulate how you can improve your application, whether it's from the development of an idea by calling them or emailing. My local district representative has been great, and he would even send me, at one point I think it might have even been paper copies of the criteria, highlighting the things that my particular business would qualify for. It was on me to write it out and take advantage of that knowledge, but he took the time to highlight how what he thought I was saying would translate into a successful application. Also, many of these programs will allow you a preliminary review. So if the clock's ticking and you can get this done before deadline, ask how you can have it reviewed by somebody who might also be part of the scoring. I don't think that's necessarily a conflict of interest, but if they can advise you on how to go after better scoring, it pays to have that done so that they have time to do it before deadline. Small Business Development Centers, SBDC, do offer year-round one-on-one business counseling and business plan development. And since many of the components of a grant application are built on a business plan, that's a good way to get it done. But you don't have to do it in that order either. You can reach out to any one of these resources and say, you know what, I'm targeting a grant and I need to get this and this done. Is that something we can prioritize? Local economic development offices have really been shining beacons of hope in the crazy modified commerce and business world here in pandemic times. They've been great with business reopening advice and resources, and also been looking ahead to what it's going to look like for any business to operate with modified considerations for how they reach their customers, for how they physically handle product, and reaching new markets who aren't in a physical space to shop for things. So reach out, ask there as well. And if you are working after hours and you would like downloadable type materials, something like score.org is a good place to start. They have some of the better financial templates that I've seen out there, literally a fillable PDF to get you started if you're not already pulling information from an accounting system like QuickBooks or Peachtree. And I think that's about where we're at. I'm not used to talking that long.
Thank you, Kristine. That's
yeah, you're welcome.
Great. Yeah. I've been writing grants for 10 years and I have like a page full of notes that I took of things that I learned. So thank you so much. Good. Before I forget, I'm going to put in the chat the Google form that folks can fill out. Yep. It'd be great if you're here now and you just want to get it done, if you want to try to set up a meeting with Kristine. I will just send that now. It just says Google form. And again, that's just an intake to set up, like an hour call with Kristine to talk through your specific program. We're going to have to figure out how many people are going to take advantage of that, and and how we can manage the time, but definitely do, because we would love to help you get as much money as we possibly can. And we do have, I guess I'll start by saying, I think some of the coolest things that you kind of mentioned in the presentation that I took note of is just the fact that, grants aren't necessarily free money, and you do have to have some skin in the game. So that's something that folks have to be prepared for. It's like, there is paperwork, there is reporting, it is work, but it is money. So that, and then I loved your tips on, getting grants done early so that you can send them to a program officer at the place where you're submitting the application to get feedback. And like you said, that is their job. That's what they get paid to do. So to take advantage of that. And I had no idea that you could request a successful grant copy. So that's a huge thing. It's worth asking. Okay, so I have some questions here that I will throw out. The first comes from Chris, and he says, what is the best option for physical capital expansion, like new buildings, prep areas, and processing spaces? So Chris, if you wanted to expand on that at all, you can. And it looks like I got a message that maybe my Google form didn't work. So I'm going to try to work on that while you elaborate on your question.
Sure. I'm working with a farm right now that literally they're at the point where they need to put up a new facility. It's a new building, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy, but it's going to serve as a prep area, and then part of it will also be used to produce products. I mean, like actually grow products. So, and the question I have is, I noticed in some of the descriptions, it's not for buildings, it's not for structures, it's not for those types of things. And I'm wondering if there's an option from a grant standpoint that would work well for that. Because I realize that in economic development, anything structural is kind of it doesn't qualify for that. You see that a lot. What are your thoughts on that?
Is the business located in Minnesota? Physical plant in Minnesota?
Yes. Yep.
So the Minnesota Value Added Grant does cover physical investments.
Oh, okay. I thought you said it didn't. That's why I asked the question. So.
No, well, the federal program doesn't, but the Minnesota program is intended to dovetail with that. So that's up to 25% of your eligible expenses. I just flipped back to that slide. Let's see. Max award, minimum feasibility studies, max award. So that's 150,000. But you have to realize that is 150,000 of that represents 25% of the project.
Okay,
so,
we've looked at that already too a little bit. I wanted to clarify that what could be used for that. So thank you.
Yeah, if it has to do with some degree of innovation, there is a new, I believe it's the USDA program that I'm going to get tongue-tied just trying to give you the acronym for it, but there are a couple webinars coming up here in July announcing this program it's a competitive grant award of up to maybe $100,000 that has to do with agricultural and community, agricultural innovation and projects that have to do with have some kind of community benefit.
Yeah, I'd love to learn more about that, because what this farm is doing is extremely innovative and nobody else is doing it.
Okay.
And they're having a lot of success with it. So would love to learn more about that.
Yeah. I feel a little undereducated on that myself, but I am signed up for one of the webinars, so I'll go back and find that and put it on the resource sheet.
That'd be great. Thank
you.
And
I'll put a note. What was your name?
Chris.
Okay. I'll maybe put an asterisk that says Chris asked about this.
And Kristine, I can reach out to you via email too.
Okay, great.
We'll do that.
We have another question from Katie that asked, are grants typically taxable monies?
Yes, grant awards are treated as income. So it is something that they will issue the tax documentation that you'll need to submit at the end of the year.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One of the things, Kristine, that I had marked down that I wanted to ask you about is, getting a feasibility study or getting an energy audit is often the first step in several grants. And I know you mentioned you worked with your local RC&D office for a feasibility study.
Well, you might hate me for saying that.
Right. Well, I'll be knocking down their doors.
Many years ago. Yeah, I didn't realize at the time how valuable that was. That was just something necessary, and the machine was already turning, and so they were able to help us with that. But yeah, I would love to know, who are the qualified independent feasibility study writers? What sort of credential do you need for specific to agriculture? And if anyone else wants to chime in on who does those, and what they cost.
Yeah, I was given a referral to the University of Minnesota Extension, if you're in Minnesota, that they do some feasibility studies. There's, ag educators who have done certain things before. I think actually it was someone from the USDA told me to contact them, but I don't know if that's the only option. I'm sure there's other options. So that's something that it would be worth, at least, I think, even if the U of M, if your local extension office can't do it, they would probably have a list of folks who could, or firms that could. So that would be a good place to start. And then I know you also mentioned the energy audit that you worked with in Winneshiek County.
Yeah.
And I know I would have to look to see what exactly the Minnesota equivalents are of those. But I do know that local, like your local rural electric co-op, like My Energy, People's Co-op in Southeast Minnesota, those are the ones I've worked with. They often do offer some sort of energy audit, or they can direct you to, I think there's an organization where like retired folks who have already, who did that for their career, want to volunteer, and they do those energy audits. And a lot of them are probably more residential, but I think there's definitely resources for more business and ag related ones. So reaching out to their, your local rural electric co-op would be a good place to start with some of that too.
I should have articulated that better. I just want to jump in to say that, yes, I said Winneshiek County, her name happens to be Winneshiek Energy District, but their REAP award does cover Houston and Fillmore counties in Minnesota as well. So they work with 11 counties total. And the criterion is that you must be a rural business. So in that 11 county district in Northeast Iowa and 2 counties in Minnesota, the only section of that area that doesn't qualify is the Dubuque City Center. So anyone else in that area, whether you're a farm or just a commercial business of some other kind, are going to qualify for that energy audit.
Okay, that's great. So Fillmore and Houston County in Southeast Minnesota. And then if folks are here from beyond those 2 counties, we can also, if you reach out to me or my colleagues, Chris or Allison or anyone on here, we can help get you connected with those. I actually, while I was listening in, I got an email about a couple marketing type grants that are new and specific. And there's also some COVID grants that are from the MDA. So we'll be sure to put those, Kristine and I talked about this earlier, that we will be sure to put those in the resource page. But a couple links that I wanted to mention, these are smaller ones that are for things like marketing. Like if you need to get a new website, or if you want to build an e-commerce platform, or if you need a rebrand, maybe some photography or video done to display your farm. There are several smaller grants, like very small, like $250 up to $2,500, $500. So they're smaller, but they're also probably a lot less work than a USDA grant. So if you wanted to get your feet wet, I'm going to go ahead and put some of those links in the chat here. And then we'll put them on the resource page as well.
And I would add to that too. A lot of businesses are considering various types of pivots right now, and a lot of it has to do with online presence or marketing. What I found and that I've needed to compile is also who are the resources to fulfill those. You can get the grant, but then who do you hire? And I know that could vary depending on your area. But if you have any recommendations or anything else that is coming from one of the administering offices, that would be great.
That's a great point, because often they like require you to do a bidding process or throw it out to get 3 bids or whatever. And so I think that would be a good question for folks to take to their local economic development authorities or their local chambers too, to see if they have lists of folks who can do that work. But that's a great point, because it's all well and good if you get the money, but if you don't have anyone to actually do the work, then you're in the same spot you were before. One question that came up is asked if this Zoom will be recorded and available. And yes, this is being recorded, and we'll have it on both the Houston County EDA website as well as the CEDA website. And I'll throw in again the link to the CEDA website specific to our agricultural resources, because you can learn about, you can see other webinars, and then sign up for our HEN program too. Kristine, one of the things I was wondering if you would be willing to just take a couple minutes too to kind of run through a couple examples of successful grants that you've gotten for either your own farm businesses or other farm businesses. Like, just an example, like I got a marketing grant for this farmer and he used it for this, this, and this. And we got it through the MDA value added grant. Would you be willing to just give us a few examples of that?
Without getting tongue-tied over the individual programs, I can tell you, okay, our farm business's first grant was a substantial award from the Value Added Producer Grant. And that's where I learned the very hard lesson that you don't want to apply for your entire business, because it makes it hard to justify a portion of the business for a subsequent grant. So I will say that I was able to use a lot of the feasibility information from our first Value Added Producer Grant to write a much smaller one that was worth about $40,000 at the time. And that was to help pay for some labeling and some marketing for some new products that we were launching that year. They were value-added products because they were sausages. They were different types of, I believe, like a Polish sausage, hot dog, a couple other further processed items made from meat, but they weren't in the marketplace prior, and they needed individual labels. But at that time we were working with a graphic design firm, so there were substantial creative costs in that. And then also in the printing, just literally making the labels available and getting them out to the processors. So you can't pay for the meat that goes into something like that, but you can pay for the packaging that makes it viable in the marketplace. That was a Value-Added Producer Grant. Let's see, I wrote SARE grants. I've also written for nonprofits. There is I'm gonna forget the name, or it's not gonna come to me at the top of my head, but I've written for both an organization based in Northeast Iowa that was looking for a feasibility study. It was funded by the city. Actually, the city was the applicant, and they were looking for a feasibility study to justify or to map out what it would cost to put fiber optic internet throughout the community, because they had some STEMs in town that were federally funded in the wake of 9/11, but it doesn't serve most of the business district, and it doesn't serve residential users. So they were looking for that. Let's see. I've also written local community grants in Winneshiek County, for example. They have an annual business competition that is specific to businesses that have been or will be in the county have been for 7 years or would be for 7 years prior or subsequent to the award. And those were grants that could be used either for fixed assets or for other operating expenses for expansion. So they do exist at the local level too. I need to go back and look at.
That's a good point to bring up, is just to make sure that folks are keeping in check with their local EDAs, their local cities, counties, to see if there's other options available other than, these larger, more state and federal grants. That's a good thing to keep in mind. Are there any other questions that folks have? I don't think I see any in the chat, but if someone wants to unmute themselves and just ask away, you can feel free to do that.
I should say too, Courtney, you'd asked about previous grants. I have written a couple times for both my own businesses and for others for another common program that people in the alternative ag sector would know about. Is called the SARE grant program, the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program. And those tend toward innovation as well. They're they're sort of on-farm research, real-time research grants. They have two different categories. One typically funds institution-based research, something that's already going on within a state or institution, usually state, or a municipality, and needs to be deployed by farmers, or it can be something originating with the farmer, where they're wanting to test a production method or a particular crop or market for a crop in a new area. But know also that those aren't necessarily direct investments in your business, although you may benefit. The outcome of the project is some kind of product, a body of research on whether something works or doesn't work. That might be a report. It might be something that you've produced that other producers can template or mimic on their own farm. And they like to see farmers working together to if it's research, obviously, if you expand the sample size, then it justifies whether more credibly whether something works in the field. But that's another long-standing program as well.
Okay. We did have another question come through that says, how many grants do you suggest people try to apply for? As many as possible?
Well, just be aware of whether they have conflict of interest, whether they preclude each other. So if you get one, then you wouldn't be able to use it or use funding from another program for the same purposes. Most have the caveat that you can't use if it's a state grant, you can't use other state money to pay for parts of the project. So there essentially eliminates the possibility of double dipping. So if it's something you've received from one grant, you can't use that grant money to pay for something else. Often that they don't want to see it as your in-kind match or your match for the program. Mm-hmm. And also, you just have to think within your business, if they don't conflict, can I reliably run more than one grant at a time? Because they're each going to have funding requirements that they're sometimes tricky for small businesses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot to keep track of, and it's good to kind of know upfront what you're going to have to report back on so that you can start collecting that information immediately. Yeah, and I had a note here just to talk about the coaching we can receive after this call. So again, I have in the chat a little bit of a ways. There's a Google Doc link. It's a Google form, and it's just a few questions, basically your name. It's basically an intake form. And if you are interested in having a private call with Kristine to talk through more of like your own personal farm and things that you're wanting to look at funding for, maybe programs or questions that you wanted to ask more personally, you can sign up through that Google form, and then we'll reach out to you to set something up with Kristine. So that's kind of specific to this grant program, and anyone who registered for this webinar is eligible to get that free hour with Kristine. But we also do have, through CEDA, we have the HEN program, the Harvest Entrepreneur Network program. So that's a different coaching thing, and that's more long-term ongoing, either for project-specific things, or if you just wanted to have a business coach to kind of bounce ideas off of or review your business plan or help you with a grant or a pro forma or something like that. And that can be on our CEDA website. So that's cedausa.com/agricultural resources. And that link is in the chat as well. And we'll send all of this out in a follow-up email too, but there are a couple opportunities for you to get some free assistance. And I appreciate asking, because I think this is something that we really want to try to get the word out. And I don't know if there's any other grants or questions. If folks, I guess I'll maybe just open it up one more time. If folks do have any other questions, we can have 30 seconds of silence to give you a chance to ask them. So please go ahead if you do. Okay. One question just came in. Can you talk about a business plan? Some grants need them, some grants don't. Do you advise that we have detailed plans in place? And I'll turn it over to Kristine, but my own answer as a business consultant is no matter what, having a business plan is a good idea. But Kristine, do you want to just speak to that as it relates to the grants?
Emphatic yes. Business plans are, they sound daunting, but I think conceptually, if you think a business plan isn't something that's just a time sink for you. It's a living, breathing document that once you have enough information in there, you're going to come back to and review, whether that's monthly or quarterly. It becomes something that's bundled with the reporting that you're assessing from your business. And it reminds you clearly about what you're doing, and it helps with goal setting. So you can tell, whether you're achieving what you set out to do, and if not, why not? Retool and go at it again. Business plans, once you reach a certain threshold in the development of your business, are necessary to approach any kind of lending, whether it's grant funding or traditional lending through a banker or through small business administration, any of those types of things. It's the information that you're going to need to know really well, and working through that it's a healthy starting point. Again, most people get into business because they love the business, whether it's the product or the place, or just making a livelihood that feels really satisfying. And then eventually the work of working on the business catches up with you. So the sooner you get through a business plan and think as a business administrator, not just someone who's working within the business, the better.
Mm-hmm.
Can I add something there real quick?
Yeah.
I would say that two things about business plans that, once people get into them, first of all, if you have a template, chances are as a business owner, you know the answers to most of the questions.
Yeah.
You just never ask yourself to articulate it. And the questions you don't know are things that you really should look into and formalize. So it may seem daunting, but the people that I sat down with and said, tell me about this, tell me about that, they have so much of the information already top of mind because it's their business. They just didn't realize they had it all right here already, So that's all I have.
Yeah. And some people, I'm a writer, so sitting down and writing things out is not intimidating to me, but it is to others. And so maybe that's just the help that you ask for. If you tell the story to someone who's helping to translate it into some written form, and again, they're living documents, so it's not for the sake of a single application. It's something that you'll come back to again and again.
Yeah, and please don't hesitate to ask for help. There's a lot of resources. It's almost, it feels a little bit like too good to be true. Like when people first learn about SBDC, where you can get free, business technical assistance and coaching. A lot of these grants, of course, do pay, they can pay someone to do that, but people like Kristine, folks like myself and my colleagues at CEDA, this is our job to help you write business plans. We have templates of business plans. We can review them. We can help just kind of set you up with any of that. So please let us know. We'll of course send this in a follow-up email, but please reach out to us as well for any assistance that you need. And I'll just quickly put my my contact information in the chat so that if anyone has questions, you can reach out to me and I can kind of direct you to the person who might be best to help. But I guess if there's no other questions, we're coming up on our 11:30 deadline, or our end time, which I'm very impressed that we have been so on schedule. So if there's any last minute questions, feel free to unmute and chat now, or otherwise, Kristine has put up her contact information here. The Google form, if you wanted to try to ask their questions more privately, we'd understand that. If you want to get more into the nitty-gritty details of your business with Kristine, use the Google form to sign up for that. And then I'll put my contact info here. I'll put my email and phone number. So if there's any questions that that you have, we can help with. That's what we're here for. So this is definitely the most fun part of our job, is getting to like talk with folks and help them realize their business things. It's much more fun than just answering emails all day. So we like that part of it. Anything else to add, Kristine? You've been so wonderful. Thank you so much for taking the time to put everything together and to share your wisdom. And I know that a lot of people are probably going to be tuning into the webinar recording as well to get this. So we'll say hello to our friends in the future and let us know how we can help.
No, thanks for this opportunity. And I enjoy it too. I've been on both sides of it, and I understand it's truly exciting to hear the passion all over again. And I will say too, it's really exciting to talk with someone about what you do, because sometimes you spend a long time in the trenches, and it's really refreshing to step outside of it and see where you've come from, where you're going, and kind of get excited about it all over again.
Yeah.